And there we go. Off and running.
It's official.
Hey,
welcome back, folks, friends. This is the Rebel's Edge. He is Pete Najarian, and depending how you're looking at this, he is that way. And I am John Najarian. And as you know, we don't bore you with a minute of macro, just a minute of macro, and we're going to give it to you right now. The losses that occurred today are really 100% because of Microsoft and their warning. I'm done, Pete. That's it.
Well, the only thing I'll add to that, John, because we still got 49 seconds left in this minute, is this. It is about earnings. And I think that's what we are looking at. You know, we're always looking for what are the catalysts every single day. And not every single day makes a lot of sense. But this was earnings. This was Microsoft. This is directly in our face. Throw in a little Boeing, throw in some of the others. We had the industrials yesterday with 3M and GE and that type of thing. We got Tesla coming up. It's about earnings. That's the macro today.
Yeah, that is the macro, Pete. You're absolutely right. And let's dive into stocks then, because that's why people tune into the show, because we actually talk about stocks. I'm going to go on with Charles Payne today, Pete. I'm going to talk about Microsoft. I'm going to talk about Tesla. But when you're looking at what's going on with Microsoft, there was also a glitch in the markets yesterday, Pete. And you pointed this out, that really kind of hurts investor sentiment. So it's not just the fact that Microsoft warned about earnings going forward. It's that Microsoft, which we talked about on this show, by the way, check this out, folks. This is Microsoft from Monday. The computer saw a big accumulation of this Friday, January 260 calls, 10,000 options. Every option's 100 shares. That means a million share equivalent. So that's a $260 million potential trade there, Pete, as far as if somebody converted all those calls to stock. I like that. The stock's 241. I think it goes a lot higher. Does it get over 260? It doesn't have to. Just a quick pop, and those calls that were purchased for 40 to 50 cents, they go to $1 or $2. That means you double or triple your money. That's what I'm rooting for. But if it doesn't work, Pete, I'll cut the loss. Yep. And that's the way it played out, Pete, because for those of you who exercised what Pete likes to call DDA, which is discipline dictates action, you're a happy camper if you bought those calls. You know, the at the money calls that I buy, because I always buy at the monies, Pete, and then I sell upside calls against them. Since this was such a short-term trade, I just sold the stock when it popped, because we were up, I think, $12. We were up around what, 253, Pete, or so?
Maybe, maybe
yesterday, maybe even a little bit higher. I didn't get higher than that, but for those of you who did, we salute you. But the opportunity presents itself. We take advantage of it, and then you have to be disciplined about taking profits. So that's what I'm going to say, Pete. What do you have to say about Microsoft?
Well, I'll just say real briefly, I know we've gone a little bit long, but we wanted to show you what we were just talking about the other day. So it is a short-term thing. I actually moved out to February, John. I put a position on in there, and I'm still holding it right now, but it was sitting in the money pretty nicely. And then we had that pull back. It was up at 254. I did the 250, 260 or something like that call spread in there, but it's out to February. So I've got a little bit of time. I think the most important thing about those earnings that I took away from it was this, and this is why I think it bounced off of 230 and it started to come off of that today. John, people aren't focusing on the right thing. It's like when everybody was looking at Apple and they said, hey, man, it's all about the iPhone. It's all about the iPhone. And then you and I would go on and say, you know what? It's not about the iPhone. It's more than that. It's about services. And then a few months later, hey, it's about wearables. It's about all the things that they are doing in the future. Well, if you look at Microsoft right now, in my opinion, AI is going to be a monster for them. And that's something that people they pushed it away, and all they did was say, well, but the cloud's decelerating. We knew that going in. And so now I think you've got to look at it and say, hey, look, with this pullback, that could be an opportunity. That's what I'm looking at right now, John. and likely to add to an already long stock position since the day Satya Nadella was named CEO. I'm still going to add to that most likely very soon.
Yeah. And this one, Microsoft folks, just like Pete said, look at the low of the day. From the second that they started talking about, well, there's this one thing, doing the Columbo, there's just one more thing. The one more thing was that their earnings going forward aren't going to be nearly as robust in the short term. And for that reason, boom, they hit the stock, traded down to 230. It's $9 off that low already, folks.
Mm-hmm.
But again, discipline dictates action. All right. By the way, just to emphasize what Pete talked about earlier, folks, take a quick look, if you could, Jared, about that OCC, the Options Clearing Corp, and the volumes that traded, because I think this picture really tells you a lot about what went on. Look at that, 56 million contracts or something, Pete, 54 million, 56 million. And then yesterday, just 36 million. The reason for that is people didn't trust the system. They didn't want to get stuck ahead of Microsoft's earnings or any of the other big earnings in a position that they couldn't get out of because the system crashed. Because of that glitch, that hurts sentiment. And Pete, you nailed that this morning when you were talking about it. All right, let's take a look, if you will, Pete, about News Corp, because somebody's been eating CNBC's lunch lately, and it's not just this show. I think it's News Corp. And they have two divisions, folks, television and then print media. So you guys kind of are familiar with that. Well, they were going to try to merge both back together. They took them apart years ago. They were going to try to put them back together. They decided, we're not going to do that. So News Corp made a big move to the upside, and so did Fox News. So both of them moving to the upside because of that, Pete.
Yeah, Rupert Murdoch, you know what? This shows you that he's not the most stubborn man in the world, because he was willing to go along with what these guys wanted. Some of the biggest investors that they've got in the company said, hey, you know what? We don't really like this deal. They were willing to go along with it. You can see the pop in the stock right now. It makes some sense, John. I think that they maybe people are excited that a decade ago when they were together and they split, now they didn't want it to go back together. They'd like to keep it split, and that's exactly what it looks like we're doing. And I think that's why we're seeing the nice pop today.
Yep. Well, moving on quickly, folks, to Extreme Networks, and that's EXTR, down huge today, a massive downside move. And they beat, Pete, on bottom line, top line, but the CFO all of a sudden says, I'm out of here. People get nervous when CFOs all of a sudden say, you know what? I ain't signing any more stuff guaranteeing these financial numbers. Now, that's not what he said, but whenever a CFO leaves with no warning whatsoever, rather than saying, 6 months from now, I'm going to be out of here, blah, 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 he says, nope, out.
And John, here's the interesting part. This guy's going to be out on February 16th. I mean, it's not like he's saying, like you just said, he's not saying, hey, about 6 months from now, maybe a year from now, I'm going to step away. This guy's saying, hey, you know what? The suitcase is packed. My briefcase is packed. I'm out of here. And certainly the reaction, either, John, they're concerned, or the concern actually is about the fact that maybe they thought this CFO really was the answer of what this company really is. And now he's going to go to the private sector somewhere else in that same sort of world. So they're going to miss him. And certainly the stock reflects it, because the stock was running to the upside, John. I mean, it was sprinting. They beat on earnings. They've been consistently beating on earnings. They had a great forecast, the outlook, and then suddenly, bang, this guy's leaving.
Yeah. And it makes you, again, no accusations here, folks, of fraud or anything else, but it makes you suspicious when a CFO or CEO decides to leave so quickly. That is something that, there could be family reasons and all that kind of stuff, but there also could be, I don't really like the way you guys are pushing me to recognize this gain right now before it even comes in. But, there are some games that some CEOs, CFOs play. And I'm not saying this is one of those situations, but certainly makes you kind of scratch your head, Pete. All right. How about this one? Solar getting clocked today. And meanwhile, energy, Pete, is basically unchanged. Crude oil was over 80. The energy stocks that we watch in the solar space were just getting slammed. Barclays took down SunPower price target by, I think, 30% from
Mhm.
26 to 18. That is a massive drop. Just did that today. Enphase, ENPH, Sunrun, a bunch of these stocks just getting slammed, Pete. So for that reason, we thought we better talk about it here.
Yep, we got Solar Edge. You can add Sonova to that. There's a whole long list of them. First Solar, all of them are down. Some are down less, 3-4%. Some are down more, 10% or more. So certainly there's some impact here, John. I think that there's a lot of things at play, but here's the reason I think that we are seeing, not just today, but why we've seen a lot of these stocks start to pull back a little bit. Look at nat gas and look at a chart of nat gas, not crude, nat gas with the solar stocks, and you'll see what I'm talking about. They move fairly well in tandem. It's not perfect, nothing is, but they move fairly close. And let's not forget, August of last year, we were trading $10 in nat gas. Yes, these names were ripping to the upside. You know where nat gas is now? It's about $3, and that's where these guys we're way up here. They're losing it, and I think a lot of that has to do with what's going on with natural gas right now, John.
Yep. And that feeds into, Pete, my unusual activity today, which is Sunrun, just RUN, because this one slammed. It's not down at 52-week lows, but it was slammed. And the read through here, Pete, is that somebody stepped in and bought 3,800 of the 24th of February expiring 25 calls. So those calls give you the right to take the stock at 25, a stock that's trading at 23. Obviously, it's a bet on the upside, but it might also be, Pete, that they're saying, this is overdone. I want to put on a small bet now, and maybe I'll add to it. So that's why I like that one for unusual activity, Pete. They paid about $1.45 for those calls. I like that as well. So I'm going right along with them in RUN Sunrun.
And we've got Tesla coming up, and we also have a stock named Rivian that's very interesting, and it should be interesting for all of us because, John, they have a great balance sheet. Now, is everything perfect? Absolutely not. But their balance sheet actually looks pretty good, gives them a good fighting chance to get to where they want to get. They do have a lot of short interest in this stock, John, and I wonder, are people starting to play the short side of this, or what are they exactly trying to shoot for right now? Because of that, we've saw 16,800 of the January. That expires Friday. So these are about to expire. 18 calls. Stock was trading about 17.70. So it's right there. 30 cents to 42 cents is what they were paying for these. Is it a hedge, which it could be for the shorts, or somebody preying on the idea that there could be a short squeeze and this could spike to the upside? So that one's pretty interesting. I like what we were seeing there. I added that to my portfolio today.
I like it, Pete. And it makes a lot of sense. And these, Pete talked about patterns and seeing things that move in concert with each other, maybe not perfect, but move in concert. One of those things is generally the EVs. If it's good for one EV, it's good for all EVs generally, unless there's either a blowout earnings or a scandal. They tend to kind of move together as a group. All right. Well, now we're going to talk NFL draft, Pete. I know you have been all over the draft and whether or not the Bears and the Texans, who draft number 1 and 2, what they're going to take, who are they going to pick, and so forth. Do you have any updates to your top 5 picks?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick update, but I also want to jump on something real quick, John. So the imperfection of the draft, you and I are really aware of this because we watch enough college football so that we both played in the professional football. You played with the Bears and I was with the Vikings and Bucks and whatever, but it is amazing how bad these guys can be, John, and how they miss all the time. So I'll give you a great example. Patrick Mahomes. He had a quarterback go in front of him. Do you know who it was? He was number 10 in the first round, though, so they didn't really miss on him. But the Chicago Bears decided, hey, let's take Mitch Trubisky. We think he's a heck of a lot better. Well, we've seen what that's happened to be. Now, the next one would be Joe Burrow. They took him first pick. That's worked out. He's one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. So that's where it works. Here's where it doesn't work. Brock Purdy is Mr. Irrelevant, right? And if you get a chance, Jared, you might want to throw this up there for everybody to take a look at this. But Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, he was the last player taken. That's what Mr. Irrelevant means. He was player 262. That means there's 261 players in front of him that they thought were better than what he is. He has come on and he has looked really, really good as not a backup, but a third string quarterback, John. This guy walked into camp from Iowa State, and you can see some of the numbers here with he and the guy he's going up against, which is Jalen Hurts. So look at that. Jalen, by the way, he was second round. He was number 53 in that same draft. Jordan Love, I don't even know if most people know where he is. He's at the Green Bay Packers, and it ticked off Aaron Rodgers when they took him in the first round. And meanwhile, Jalen Hurts kept sliding down and sliding down and sliding down. And you've got these two in the NFC. You've got the first two that I was talking about in the AFC. It's pretty interesting. So as far as the draft goes, and it's not perfect, and we were just deciding why that looks that way, I've got you guys, the Chicago Bears, John, not trading away. They're going to take Will Anderson. And I think that makes sense. That linebacker from Alabama, he's unbelievable. Then I think
rush D end.
Yeah. Oh, he's a freak show.
He's edge rusher, they call him, right?
Edge. Yeah, he's unreal. I like him. I like C.J. Stroud to go to the Texans. They need a quarterback. They've got a guy named Mills who, has anybody ever heard of him, by the way? You didn't know where he went? I mean, let's be honest. The guy wasn't the NFL. He's the guy that usually should be coming in off the bench, which he used to do when Watson was still there. Watson's no longer there. He became the guy. It's why they get the second pick in the draft. If they wouldn't have won the last game with Lovie Smith, they'd have the first pick in the draft. But either way, they need a quarterback, so they're going to get their quarterback. Paris Johnson going to Arizona, Bryce Young going to the Colts, and I think Seattle's going to take that big kid, Jalen Carter, who everybody loves, including myself. They need a defensive guy on the Seattle Seahawks. This guy fits the mold. I think you and I were pretty close on this last time when we went through this, but do you agree with those first five?
I do. Don't have any changes there, Pete. Obviously, some things will happen as we get into the combine and so forth, because somebody will blow a drug test, or somebody will be injured, or somebody will really impress and could move up. But those top five, I think, are pretty solid. I'll say this about Aaron Rodgers, though, Pete. A lot of people, when a quarterback gets angry like Aaron did about that pick, it's probably not because he or, the quarterback, whether it's Aaron or Tom Brady or anybody else, is worried about, oh, they're drafting that guy because they think I'm done. No, they want a backup. Obviously, they want somebody you can tutor. But I think, Pete, the real thing is you're saying, my God, our offensive line is Swiss cheese. You couldn't have got me a big stud offensive lineman like this year, Pete. If it was happening this year, there are several. One of them is a friend of mine's son, Skoronsky, up at Northwestern. The kid's, I think, 6'4" or 6'5", 340 pounds. He's a beast.
Great
so if
player.
you're a quarterback, you want to see them draft a person like that or a wide receiver. Running back, not so much, but unless it's like McCaffrey. If it's somebody that can catch the ball out of the backfield, and it's not just him, Singletary can do it over with Buffalo and all that kind of stuff. But if you're somebody who can protect the quarterback, that's why Aaron Rodgers and people like him get pissed when you draft a quarterback number one and they're still around, because they're saying, I need blockers. I need a wideout that can rip through the defensive backs and ain't afraid to go across the middle. They're tough to find, those guys. All right. How about this, Pete? What's your second side of the sports trivia today?
All right. So the most dominant sports city right now is Boston. And the most dominant sport, a team in any sport, you might say the Celtics, but I'm actually going to go to somewhere where you and I don't go very often, but the Boston Bruins. Now, you and I grew up in San Francisco. For the people who don't know where we grew up, we're Bay Area guys. We had the California Golden Seals, if you recall, John. They were a hockey team that no longer exists, but they were in San Francisco. Then they went over to Oakland, and then eventually they moved, and they were Cleveland. No longer exist. But we grew up there. Then we moved to Minnesota. Now we got the Minnesota North Stars, right? And they were great. Let me tell you something. There's a team in Boston right now, the Boston Bruins, that absolutely might be the best hockey team to ever play. And when I say that, the reason I say that is there's nobody close right now, John. when you look at the points and all the rest of this, now I don't pretend to be some great hockey guy, but I'm pretty good with numbers. How about this? They have scored 181 goals this year. They've given up 98. So in other words, they've scored more goals than any other team in all of the NHL, and nobody's even close to them with how many goals they've given up at 98. Everybody else is 120, 130, 140. It gives you an idea of just how dominant these guys are. And now Tampa won, along with Detroit, 62 games in the greatest seasons that those teams have ever had in the NHL. These guys are on pace for 66. And it just shows you the sheer dominance of what they are doing right now. It's a fun team to watch. I encourage people that don't really follow hockey, they need to follow these guys because, John, when teams like this are playing, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, it doesn't matter. When they're on fire like these guys are, every game is fun to watch. And these guys have absolutely been crushing everybody. I just watched a game the other night myself. I don't watch hockey. I found myself watching hockey. I'm watching the Boston Bruins, and these guys are absolutely amazing. So I would encourage people, if you're not, you should take a look at what these guys are doing on a night in and night out basis. They are dominant, and it's really fun. You used to play hockey.
So did you.
Well, yeah, but you were actually better at it than me.
I don't know about that. I was a goalie. Got hit in the face with the puck a few too many times, I think, Pete. Luckily, I had a mask, but I remember once Pete got hit. I was wearing one of those like Jerry Cheever's masks, speaking of Boston, the one that's white and it's right up against your face like Jason, the serial killer. But nobody ever told me that you're supposed to mold those things directly to your face. I just took the one from the guy the season before and put that on. So I got hit right in the eye. And, it kind of stunned me for a second. So my head flipped down and all this blood went shooting out of the eye hole of the goalie mask. So it was something like right out of Airplane, Pete, or something like that, where, Leslie Nielsen might say, I think he's dead, because there's this white mask, blood shooting out of the eye hole of the white mask, walked over to our dad's office and he stitched me up between periods.
Yep.
No Novocaine. Pete knows that one all too well. Our dad was not a big fan of Novocaine.
We usually figured it was our own fault for getting to where we got. I one time was stabbed. We won't get into that, but he said, you know what, for being an idiot, I'm going to sew you up here right on the table. So it's laid out. It's like, hey, man, can I get anything? He goes, I'll give you a shot of tequila if you want.
Yep. I remember a certain Minnesota attorney general or something, Pete, that he stitched up on the table because his dad was not happy to know that kid was still playing hockey.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to be playing. His dad was a doctor, so he couldn't go home. He comes on and goes, hey, doc, I really need you to fix me up, but make it so it looks really good so my dad can't notice it. His dad, of course, noticed it. His dad's not an idiot.
when your eye looks like this.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, I'm going to be on with Charles Payne at 2 p.m. Eastern time today. So please tune into that. Tell a friend about the Rebels Edge. We're going to be starting with a Rebels Edge extra in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you make note of that. You know that we stream on Spotify, Twitter, YouTube, and marketrebellion.com/edge. Just feed in marketrebellion.com/edge and you can see the broadcasts. And by the way, you can subscribe on YouTube. Doesn't cost you a penny. You just go to YouTube, in the search bar, type in Market Rebellion. We're up over 40 some odd thousand people have done that now, Pete. So we're really proud of that. And we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time.